Hey, thanks for joining me on today's podcast. This is David from Dadstrong.com, and today we have an interview with Dr. Andrew Hall. Amazing guy, and he has so much wisdom on health and on physiology. He practices as a chiropractor, and he goes through some really deep content on stress and how our bodies handle it and how we can handle stress. So sit back, enjoy this conversation. I know you're going to love it.
So here's the deal. Most dads today feel stuck, overwhelmed, like a shadow of the man they once were in their primes. And that's not okay. We're taking back the dad flag and creating a movement of men who will be strong leaders for their family, strong physically for their health, strong mentally for their careers, and strong internally for a balanced life. We are Dadstrong, and this podcast is for you.
All right, Dr. Hall, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for being on here, man.
I am really excited to be on with you, David. This is, I think this is going to be really fun. I've been looking forward to it for a while.
Yeah. So really, first of all, I had been reading through your bio, and you have quite a global perspective as far as your background goes. And I wanted to hear a little bit about more about your story for those listening. And if you could tie in some of the different perspective that you had outside of the United States in terms of health, in terms of wellness, because sometimes we get so pigeonholed here in terms of what we're feeding on through U.S. media sources. Yep. And we lose sight of a bigger narrative with health. So is there anything that you can kind of pass that story along? Any way you can do that and tie in some of the global perspective that you learned throughout your travels?
Sure, absolutely. I am originally from Kansas City, Overland Park, Kansas, to be more specific. Born and raised here. I am one of 5 kids, and that is a whole other story in and of itself of being one of 5. Loved it, had a great upbringing, loved Kansas. At some point in about my 20s, I just got a little restless. And you have to understand, my family, we're all very right-brained. My dad is a pastor, still a pastor. My mom was also very big communications oriented. My grandmother's a librarian. Mom read all of this stuff. We're all very right-brained kind of people. So the whole talking, acting, writing, all of this stuff, we're all very that way. And it was just a very fun and great environment to grow up in with all 5 of us. It was chaotic, but it was also really, really fun. I originally got my degree in literature from University of Missouri, Kansas City, UMKC, go Roos. Got it from there. And after that, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I had no idea where I wanted to go. Like all lit majors, right after they graduate, I waited tables. So that's where I was at that point, 22 years old, waiting tables, being like, okay, I'm really good at English literature, but I don't know how that's going to do anything and help anyone. And that's also part of our background is, my family being very right-brained, but also very service-oriented. We were raised in an environment where you are to be of service to people, to God, to your community. And my sister nurse, my brother worked for the school district. My other brother worked for the school district. Dad's a pastor. And here I am waiting tables. Now, I was waiting tables at some really nice places, knew a lot about wine, but I just realized I'm just helping people get drunk. So that needed to change. and intersecting before I graduated, I got really restless about my junior year of college. And I was like, I need to get out of here. I need to leave the city. I need to just expand my horizons. And it was because of a girl. So I was like, break up. I need to get out of here. Like all good stories, it starts with a girl. And so I was like, I need to get out of Kansas City immediately. And I was just like, what am I going to do? Well, at school, at the college, at UMKC, they have a program where you can travel abroad for a summer. They give you a work visa, and you just go over there. You have to have about $1,000 and your plane ticket, and you show up and you get a job. And there was all of these countries, and I was like, I'm not going to learn another language. I don't want to do the language barrier thing. I'm like, England, it seems like everyone does that. I'm like, hey, Ireland, that sounds cool. So at that time, I decided that I'm going to go to Ireland. And my parents are like, okay, so you're going to go to Ireland for the summer? And I was like, yeah. And they're like, well, what are you going to bring? I'm like, a backpack. And they're like, well, what are you going to do? I'm like, get a job. And they're like, do you know where you're going to get a job at? I was like, no. They're like, you know where you're going to stay? No, I'm just going to show up and go to Ireland. And they were like, okay, well, have fun, be safe. And so I got on a plane and I went to Ireland. And it was still one of the best experiences I've ever done in my entire life, where I just got on a plane and I left. And there's a sense of freedom that I cannot explain, to having all of your worldly possessions on your back and you're out. And you're like,
right.
Okay, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to do something. And this conversation is so important as it comes to health, because in Ireland is where I met my wife. We met through a mutual Irish friend in a very the western village of Galway, western city of Galway in Ireland. We were, I just met him through that Irish friend. We started hanging out, and after about a day or so, it was like, I need to hang out with you a lot. And it really was just kind of love. It just was. She is not Irish. She's Canadian. She's from Northern Ontario, Sudbury, Ontario. And we were just stuck together for 6 weeks, totally in love, all of the great sappy stuff. I came back to Kansas City. She went back to Canada. We did a long distance relationship for 2 years. It was the first part of the very first time we did long distance. We did it again at a later time that I'll get to. We did that. She finally moved here. At the second year, we're like, okay, one of us has to commit. I spent some time in Canada with her after I graduated from my undergrad. And then she was going to be a chiropractor, and she was going to go to Palmer College of Chiropractic in Iowa. She's one of those really annoying people who knows what they want to do almost immediately. I don't know if you know those people.
Yep.
They're annoying. They're so driven and they're so smart and they know exactly what they want and they go out and get it. I was not that person. And I was like, wow, you're really into this chiropractic thing. I'll come with you. So we moved to Davenport, Iowa. And this is, I want to say 2001. And I was like, wow, you are really passionate about this chiropractic thing. Because at that time, I was still selling wine and waiting tables. And so I was like, you're really passionate about being a chiropractor. Obviously, we're going to spend a lot of time, energy, and money on this. I need to know more about it and what you're so passionate about. So I started to just go to classes, and I started to go to certain philosophy events. There's a very deep philosophy and history in chiropractic. And so I would go to different philosophy events just to be like, okay, well, I'm interested in what's going on here. And so her friends, of course, they're in school. It's this really deep, it's the same amount of education as a medical doctor. There's chiropractors and medical doctors have the same amount of education hours wise, where in a medical doctor's focusing on pathology and pharmacology, chiropractors were focusing more on radiology, anatomy, physiology, and adjusting. So it's very in-depth. It's very, you just totally throw yourself into it. So that's all she talked about. And about a year and a half into this, I had decided to become a chiropractor. I was like, I felt called to it. I felt that this was the thing that I had been looking for, to be of service, but not go into the ministry or become a teacher, and to engage that. So after she had been in school a year and a half, I enrolled myself. And being a lit major, I had avoided all the hard sciences like the plague. And I had about a year and a half of prerequisites to do, which I did. And then started in school at chiropractic. And I know I'm kind of taking the long way around to get to, the places that we've traveled together and that. But it's spending time in Canada, because I lived in Canada for a while. then getting this outside perspective of the different travels, because we had traveled to Vietnam to do our clinic abroads, where as a part of school, you basically can volunteer to go and serve in different places. I mean, you could go to India, you could go to, there was a group that went to Africa. We went for about 3 weeks to Vietnam, and you would basically, it was a group of about 20 of us students and about 4 doctors. We'd show up at a hospital, set our tables up, and people would just show up. And it was like 700 people at a time. So you look up and people walk 2 days to get to you, and talk about a whole change in perspective on what you're doing. And it was the kind of things where you saw amazing things happen, where people who weren't able to walk did walk, kids who had been lifeless and failure to thrive, you're working on them, you're adjusting them, you're freeing that nerve flow to their brains, and they're able to sleep through the night for the first time in 2 years. They're able to start looking and engaging with their parents. I mean, just amazing kind of stuff that we saw in these things. So it really gave me a bigger perspective of, outside of the United States, how the rest of the world looks at health. And it's really kind of funny. It's very different in a lot of different ways. I don't know if you've done any traveling, David, where you've seen that or been engaged with, maybe somewhere outside of the United States, they've had a different perspective on health.
Yeah, just down to Nassau, and then down to Mexico, and definitely a different perspective of health down in Mexico. But I've never been in the hands-on, kind of healing environment. It was mostly ministry stuff. Not more on the healing side, but understanding the health side of things, as far as nutrition and everything, it was very different in those areas than it is in the United States. But I can't even imagine how much of a mind-blowing experience that was for you to see that amount of demand and desire and openness in another country as compared to what we have here in the United States.
Yeah. And it wasn't just like, I mean, it's such a tough place, where here in the United States, I feel like where we are in the medical system, because again, and I'll use this as allopathic. Allopathic is your medical doctor, the hospitals, things like that, where chiropractors were more on the holistic side. It's so huge here. It's so big. It's overwhelming. It takes over things. And in some ways that's good, because again, in Vietnam, we're seeing kids who have been born because of Agent Orange genetic manipulations and things like that, and old shrapnel wounds, and the kind of fractures that no problem here in the United States. But so they had to rely on the more naturalistic ways of healing, which in a lot of ways are just as effective, if not more effective, than a lot of the pharmacology that we're exposed to here. So it's kind of this half and half, where you want to strike that balance between my body knows how to heal. It has this innate ability. We're genetically programmed to heal. But when there's an emergency situation, no one in the United States is better at saving your life, or no one in the world is better at saving your life than an American medical doctor, because our emergency services are so profound and so good. But where we're slipping as far as healthcare goes is that we don't have a very good healthcare system. And when I say healthcare, I mean our medical profession does not know how to teach people how to be healthy. And we really need to get back to some of those naturalistic ways of life in order to be healthy. Now, I'm not saying that we all need to become vegans and go super paleo and live out in the woods. I'm not saying that, but there's some really interesting things and some really interesting research that's coming out right now about, hey, if we're going against our genetic code, the way that we live our lives right now, we are not genetically programmed to deal with all the things that we expose our lives to. And when I say exposed to, I mainly mean stress. That's where really the big conversation starts, at least where it starts here in our office, and the way we look at health is, how are you dealing with stress?
So talk to me a little bit on that side of things, on stress. What are some misconceptions that you've seen over your years of practicing, of what are indicators of stress, what are causes of stress, and what are ways that men, specifically as fathers, are using as coping mechanisms that they may not even know they're using to treat the symptoms of stress? So if you could talk a little bit about those misconceptions, I think that could help some guys a lot.
Great. And that's really what I want to hone on, is how can we help the dads out there who are dealing with stress. And frankly, guys, I think we have this misconception in our minds that we just start with. It's like, I've got to get rid of all stress. Well, what I say in my office almost every day is the only people who don't have stress are the dead people. So let's just step into that place of we all have stress. We all deal with it. It's there. It's a consistency. The goal is not necessarily to get rid of all stress. The goal is to engage and find better ways to help our bodies cope with the stress. And also, what kind of stresses can we find that actually help us? Because there's such a thing called eustress, EU stress, where it actually is a positive stress. It's a good stress. So the way that we talk about stress in our office, because it's funny, everyone knows that they have stress. I mean, again, you go into the shopping mall and you start asking people, hey, do you have stress? They're like, you have no idea how much stress I'm under. You have no idea what my day is like. And then you ask them, hey, could you define that stress? And they're like, define stress? Yeah. What's stress? And they're like, my days. So that's where it starts getting a little gray. And the way that we define stress, we basically break it down into categories. It's physical stress, it's chemical stress, and it's emotional stress. Most people, when they think about stress, they think more about the physical and the chemical aspect of it, where it's like, physical stress is a car accident, it's a sports injury, it's old traumas, but it's also consistent stress, sitting all day at a computer, if that's your job. That is hugely stressful to the body. So we talk about it in that way. Then we look at chemical stress. We're all exposed to hundreds of different chemicals every day. Through our foods, through the air that we breathe, and that plays a weight on our bodies. Chemical stress is one of those things. And again, of course, then let's start talking about caffeine and alcohol and carbs and prescription meds and all of those things. And then we talk about emotional stress. And most people can identify with emotional stress, be it, job demands, family demands, kid demands, death of a parent, all of that stuff. And so we have those three categories that we have to look at all at the same time. And frankly, this is where guys really back off really quick, is when we start talking about emotional stress, because, we're really quick to go out and, help someone help us with a broken arm or a fractured arm to get that casted. But we are really slow to go out and have someone help us with a broken heart or an emotional trauma or something that we've been injured. And frankly, it is the emotional stress that is the biggest predictor of how we're going to do long-term in our health. How do you deal with that emotional stress? How do you deal with, you're having a tough time in your marriage? How do you deal with the teenage kids? How do you deal with that over-demanding boss? Because that is going to dictate how you deal with the physical stresses and the chemical stresses. Is that kind of what you're looking at? Is that kind of what you're looking for, David?
Yes, I really appreciate the categorization of those different types of stresses, because I think when we hear the word stress, we just think pressure in one sense, and we don't really, at least I'll speak for myself. I cannot, put a broad stroke here that everybody thinks this way, but personally I think, okay, pressure, but that doesn't necessarily have to, it doesn't have to bring in relational pressure or relational injuries, I guess, when somebody stabs you in the back or you feel betrayed or whatever. You just don't think physiologically with that sort of thing. How does that? I mean, so whenever I've gone to chiropractic doctors, they know the stresses on my body better than I do. Okay, you've got a lot of stress in this area of your body or whatever. I'm just curious, how does emotional stress usually manifest itself in a person's body?
Great question. Our bodies don't know, and here's the really big point. Our bodies don't know the difference between an actual stress and stress that's made up in our mind. There's no difference physiologically. Wow. If you sit there and you have a lot of anxiety about, let's say that you got a big interview or you have a big presentation and work that's coming up and you are working hard and you are stressed out and you are late at night staying up and you are thinking of all the bad things that can happen, your body doesn't know the difference between that actually happening and what's in your mind. There's no physiological difference. So it's like you are reliving that emotional, like what's the worst thing that can happen, and you sit there and stew on it. Physiologically speaking, it's actually happening. And it's really interesting when we get down, and again, I'm not going to nerd out on the doctor stuff, so don't worry, guys. But you have to think about there's two different areas of what your nervous system, what we call the autonomic nervous system. It's the automatic nervous system. It's beating our hearts right now. It's digesting your food. It's regulating your hormone levels. It's doing all of the millions of things that we don't even think about right now. There's two parts of it, what we call the parasympathetic and the sympathetic. You don't have to remember those words. You have to think about parasympathetic is rest, digest, reproduce, all of those things that happen, what I say, all the things that happen on a cruise ship: rest, digest, repair, reproduce, all of those things. And then the sympathetic, which is fight or flight, which you being chased by a bear, your sympathetic kicks in and it does a whole cascade of physiological things. Now, the interesting thing before we even get into what happens to your body when you're under stress, biologically speaking, you should only be in fight or flight about 20% of the time. You are genetically programmed to sit in that parasympathetic, the rest, the digest, the reproduce, the repair, hang out and be groovy. That's where most of us are supposed to be. Now, if you ask the average person, hey, do you feel like 80% of the day you're on vacation? They're like, hell no. Like, no, those 80% of the time I feel like I'm being chased by a tiger, and 20% of the time, usually when I'm sleeping or after I've just eaten, that's where I feel a little bit better. So there's this real problem with how our society, there's a lot of stress there. Anyway, getting back to the physiological part of it, when we're under stress, when our bodies kick in, and I could spend about 20 minutes just talking about this alone. But what happens is there's certain things that happen, physiologically speaking, that your body does, which is brilliant, which is why we've been able to survive as a species as long as we have, because we used to live with a bunch of tigers and bears roaming around. And when we were confronted by that threat, we had to survive as a species. So our bodies would normally, and one of the big things that it does is it increases your cortisol levels. And cortisol has been a big buzzword out there in health circles right now because it is the major stress hormone of the body. So your pituitary gland secretes the cortisol, and that causes a whole cascade of all your other hormones. So cortisol goes out there, and number one thing, it increases your heart rate, it increases your blood pressure levels, it increases, there's another one that I'm sitting here thinking of. So heart rate goes up, blood pressure goes up, your blood glucose level goes up, your cholesterol levels go up. All of those things normal, because again, you need more blood to your muscles if you're going to fight off a tiger, if you're going to run away from a tiger. You need all of those things to happen. But if that stays in that period for a long period of time, or if you stay in that stress response, what does increased heart rate sound like? What does increased blood pressure over months, days, and years? What does increased cholesterol levels sound like? It sounds like heart disease. Right. And that's exactly what it is. It is because our bodies, and primarily our heart, has been under stress for a long period of time. You've been, you can't get away from the tiger. And so you're always stuck in that stress response. And the other thing, and again, heart disease, number one killer of Americans. Number one killer of Americans is heart disease. The other thing that it does is it increases our blood glucose levels. You have to have a lot of sugar to fight off that tiger, to run away from that tiger. So your body floods your bloodstream with sugar. That's a great thing, especially if you're being chased by something. But you should just go back to that normal after 20 minutes, or frankly, biologically speaking, you either burn all of that off being chased by the tiger, or the tiger catches you and you die, and it doesn't matter in the first place. But what happens is that we stay in that place. So increased blood glucose levels and insulin resistance, that's diabetes. Yeah. That is stress causing diabetes. And again, what they're saying and what we're seeing in the stats is so many of the chronic diseases that we deal with, like heart disease, like autoimmune issues, like diabetes, all of those things are caused by stress. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, the other thing that your body does is it decreases your cellular immunity. Your body, in its wisdom, downregulates your ability to fight off the flu, because frankly, you don't need to worry about the flu if you're being chased by a tiger. So it decreases your cellular immunity. But if you times that by weeks, months, and years, suddenly you're the guy that gets everything in the office, or you're sick 2 or 3 times a week with pneumonia, or suddenly you have cancer when you thought you were normally healthy. And again, all of our bodies have cancer cells right now, but our immune systems are so strong and powerful that it just kills off that cancer no problem. But if you're under stress for long periods of time, you get sick. I mean, you remember going through finals in college. Everyone got sick during finals because we're all stressed out. Right. So that's exactly it.
So I'll bring it down to a really, really practical example and form a question around this. So my wife, I don't know, a year ago, I guess, we've been heavy in exercise for the last 3 or 4 years now. And we went to one of these Vita shops or nutrition shops, and they have this body fat indexing machine that you stand on it, right? You hold the paddles and you put your feet on it, and it, reads your body and gives a readout of fat percentage, lean muscle mass and all that stuff. So she got one of these readings, and the guy said, "Oh, from 2 weeks ago, it looks like you've gained a little bit of weight. What is causing your weight gain?" And that immediately, right? First of all, you don't say that to a woman. Second of all,
I was going to say, you just said, wow.
Yeah, exactly. Second of all,
good job there, man.
It increased that cortisol level in her and stressed her out to the point where she started rapidly gaining over the next 4 months. And she couldn't shake this, like, I'm working out, I'm healthy, I'm not changing any of my eating habits, but I'm still gaining weight and I can't stop. So then it was, maybe it's my thyroid, maybe there's some other issue going on with me, I don't know. And then it just, it snowballs as far as the stress levels go. And I don't know, maybe it was 3 months ago, we got all the blood work back and everything, and they said, "You're completely medically normal. There's nothing wrong with you." And it was, I was like, "Honey, I think it's stress. You're stressed about the kids, stressed about your weight, stressed about working out. You're constantly checking your weight. Like, just, I think it's stress." And so she started to take some steps to kind of chill out a little bit. She's very type A, high strung, which does not help the situation. But from
married the same,
yeah, I think so. So I'm not alone. But what that did is it brought her down this journey of, I need to work harder. I need to work out instead of 4 days a week. I need to work out 6 days a week. I need to push through this and lose the weight. And it just, so is that a potential, is that accurate actually? It would be my first question. Is that hypothesis accurate, that the stress inhibited her from losing that weight, even though her daily habits were the same? And can that be something that's happening to guys right now who are also looking to lose weight, but they have so many outer pressures on them and so much stress in their life that it doesn't quite matter how much they do physically, they may not be able to release those pounds?
Yeah, absolutely. That is such a valid thing. I'm going to pause the podcast just for a second because my son just walked in.
Sure.
Hey, Jack. Sorry about that. You can just edit this out.
Yeah, you're fine.
No, we don't have one. Sorry, dude. Sorry, iPad emergency.
So, we all have those.
Yep. Okay, so back on topic. Absolutely, that can cause the kind of weight issues that you were just describing with your wife. And it's one of the points where, and it's an amazing reaction of our bodies when we are under stress. What happens is your thyroid gets downregulated. So there's really 3 major metabolic areas, hormone levels in your body, or areas in your body that your body produces hormones. Pituitary gland in your brain, thyroid gland, which is right in front of your throat, and then the adrenal glands, which sits right above your kidneys. When we are under high amounts of that sympathetic stress, your adrenal glands take over. They hyperstimulate, they go and they increase all of the big hormones, the stress hormones that they secrete. And those stress hormones decrease what we call the happy hormones. So your serotonins, your oxytocins, your melatonins, all of those good hormones that basically help us sleep, help us feel good, help us connect to other people, it downregulates that. And that's a really smart thing to do, because you don't need to feel really sleepy if you're being chased by a tiger or a bear.
Right.
But when those adrenal glands take over and your body's flooded with that kind of stress all the time, suddenly you can't get to those happy hormones, the melatonins, the serotonins. You lose sleep. You feel depressed. You can't connect with other people, all of that things. And it downregulates your metabolism at the same time. The way that I tell people is that, if sympathetic is having your foot on the gas pedal, again, revving the engine really hard. Your foot's on the gas pedal, but your body at the same time is saying, whoa, we got to slow down. Your foot's on the brake at the same time.
Yeah.
So it's gas and brake at the same time. And of course, it totally throws our metabolism off. And especially guys, I mean, I hear this all the time from women and from men, especially guys, if we're trying to lose weight, we're trying to get those extra pounds off, we're trying to, engage in healthy habits. If you're not managing the stress, be it at work or at home, you're not going to be able to lose the weight. You have to get in there. And again, this doesn't mean that you have to, be going to therapy 2 times a week and, dive into all of that. Trust me, that's healthy for you. But you also have to address, okay, where's the biggest stress in my life coming from right now? And what kind of things can I do to help balance that out? Now, granted, exercise is one of the best things to help your body regulate the hormones. It can so help that, but it's really interesting. Your wife went too far in the other direction, because you can get to the point where you're exercising too much, you're working that body, you're driving that metabolic engine, and it just burns it out. And so you can't lose those extra pounds, those extra 10 pounds, and that's directly due to stress. Does that make sense? That's kind of what you're looking for?
Yep, that totally makes sense. And I just want to add one point here. Another practical point is for me, I was very stressed out a lot of the time. After my wife had our first son, she suffered from some severe postpartum depression, and all the weight of everything in our home fell on me. And so I never left that state mentally for like 5 years. And even though she had gotten through it, I still had this unrealistic mental state that I thought everything still had to be on me, and I couldn't let her handle too many things because it might break her mentally. And I saw her as this, fragile being. So I would continue to just pile stuff on my shoulders and pile stuff. So it was all of this uncommunicated expectation and all these just lies, basically. But we weren't communicating, and I didn't even want to bring that up because I thought, well, I don't want to disturb her. She's doing so well. I want to keep her healthy in any way I can. And avoiding that conversation kept me in a place of heavy stress for a long time, where I'm grinding my teeth, my hair is getting gray. Like, I had all these things. I wasn't sleeping. I had no idea what was going on. My body was screaming at me, but I was just like, I don't know what else to do. I'm going to keep going. I don't even know there's a problem. But I guess what I want to bring up is sometimes that stress can be in place because we haven't had a conversation about expectations. And there's most likely you're avoiding what you think is a scary conversation, but it can bring you so much freedom in your relationship that it is so worth broaching the subject of whatever it is. If you're upset, like us with young kids, you're upset you're the only one getting up in the middle of the night with the kids, have the conversation with your spouse. They love you. They'll probably help. You don't have to try to protect and shield your spouse from absolutely everything that's going on, and then you're building up all this stress, and then not just stress, but resentment, which is even more stress on your body. So I just wanted to bring that there's relational stress that can happen that we are putting on ourselves that just doesn't have to be there, if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. And I couldn't agree more. And I'm so glad that you are making the conversation go in this direction, because, guys, we are notorious for stuffing the emotions, standing up and being the strong ones, and doing all the male things that we're expected to do, which is great. I mean, in the short term, sometimes we need to do that, especially in your situation with your wife going through some health issues right after you've had a baby. My wife has been through similar kind of health issues where it's like, nope, I got to step up and be the man and be that guy and take on that responsibility. But we can only do that for a short period of time without not only burning our bodies out, but burning out our emotions and our relationships and things like that. And I love that you are bringing that up communication, talk to your spouse. Our relationships are where we get the most amount of happiness and fulfillment and joy in our lives. Study after study shows this and talks about it, where people are wanting those relationships. And relationships, healthy relationships, are a good form of stress. That's one of those good forms of stress that I talked about, where it's an an entity or something that's breaking you down in order to build you back up in a healthy way. If you're in a healthy relationship, that person wants you to be a better version of yourself all the time and works towards that. And hopefully you want that for them. And you are working together towards better versions of yourself and a better life. And because it's two people, there's some friction there and there's some tough times and you have those tough conversations, but you know what? It's all for the better for you to be healthier. I mean, those are great kind of things, those relationships. And we as men, I think we get stuck in the producer role, in the I just got to get out and produce for the family and go to work and do all of that stuff. What if you spent 10% of your work hours building your relationships? What if if you're working a 40-hour work week with, frankly, I don't know many people who are working a 40-hour work week. It's usually more than that.
Yeah.
But what if they're doing that and you spent 4 hours just engaging with your wife and your kids and uninterrupted time and all of that? Your happiness will go up. It's not the money that causes a greater amount of happiness. I mean, there's studies that show you hit a certain level of incoming and earning, your happiness actually goes down. And again, there's certain numbers to that. Trust me, I came from, a family of 5 on a pastor's salary.
Yeah.
Lack of money causes a lot of unhappiness.
Yeah,
I'm not
true.
saying that. But there's also saying, okay, where is the best place that my time and my focus and my emotions, because we all have limited resources on that, where's the best place that I can put that? And so much of it is working our relationships because it gives us the biggest bang for our buck. It really does. And it doesn't just have to be with spouse. It can be with your family. It can be with your dog. It can be whatever it is. And it decreases the stress in your life.
So speaking of investing time, which I love that analogy, you're not spending time. There's a difference between spending and investing. If anybody knows any basic level of something about money and investment. And when you invest in something, it compounds eventually if it's a good investment. So that's what happens relationally. I absolutely love that. What have you seen physiologically, if anything, what issues have been caused physiologically with the distraction of too much technology in front of people? Is that an issue that you're seeing in kids or in adults? Because, when you talk about investing time into a relationship, a lot of us have a really intimate relationship with our devices, whatever it is, an iPad, an iPhone, a computer, or a screen, mostly screens. What is a side effect of too much time in that you've seen in your practice?
Well, and I'll answer that question. I want to kind of continue with your analogy because we use the same investing analogy in our practice where, you know what, you can invest every time you go and work out. You're investing into that health bank account. Every time you choose that salad over the donut, you're investing. You just put $100 into that health bank account. Think about it that way, but also think about it under those stressful times where, you know what? Hey, there's been a health issue either with myself or someone in my family, or wow, I really have to, burn the midnight oil to hit this deadline. You can withdraw from that health bank account. And you know what? That's okay. Because if you've been investing in that, and if you've been putting and stockpiling and having some really great healthy habits, your body can deal with an amount of stress and it doesn't break you. I mean, I have a lot of people who come into my office who have done some great financial investing, but their health, they are completely broke, if not $80,000 in debt health-wise with what's going on. And so they have to build that back up. So our bodies can handle the amount of stress. It just depends on how much you've built up that health bank account. And again, that's why our bodies can balance that out. And you can withdraw from that bank account if you've been having some great healthy habits. So getting back to the technology thing, yes. The main thing that I see with technology, and we can get into the whole brain part and dopamine and things like that. We don't really need to do that. The main thing that I see is the forward head posture, is the sedentary aspect of our lives. And I'm not talking just about kids. I'm talking about adults too. Our bodies are not meant to sit in front of a computer screen 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, or 6 days a week. We are not designed to do that. We are designed to move. Your body heals best when it moves. It functions best when it moves. It needs to move in order to be healthy and strong. You need to think of movement and exercise as a nutrient. That is just one of the best ways to look at it. Your body needs food, your body needs air, your body needs water, and it needs movement in order to survive. There's no shortcutting that. That's just physiology. That's like arguing with God about, why do I need to breathe in order to be healthy? I mean, that's just a law of nature. It's just a law of nature. And you can't argue physiology. And it's the same thing with movement. All of the studies that we're seeing is that we're just, as a society, not moving enough. And it doesn't necessarily have to be that we have to go, start running 5Ks and marathons. No, it's you need to go for walks. You need to get up and play with your kids, and you need to play with your grandkids. You need to get a standing desk rather than a sitting desk. Sitting is the new smoking. There is enough. You can see that tagline. There is enough research out there. I was just reading a study recently where they were talking about for every hour of sitting that you do now, it's like smoking 2 cigarettes.
Wow.
And I read that and I'm like, I sit about 4 to 5 hours a day, not necessarily wanting to, but needing to. I'm like, I'm a half a pack a day smoker.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, that's crazy. But it's one of those things that you can change and you have control over. And when I'm helping people make lifestyle changes, it's not about the big swooping changes where you're, 300 pounds and you want to lose 100 pounds. But suddenly you become a vegan and you start doing yoga. And for some time, that doesn't work for a lot of people. It's small changes over time that help. And so it's maybe getting a standing desk at work. It is maybe taking the kids out for a walk, walking for 10 minutes if you're out of shape. I love the program From Couch to 5K. That's a great one where if someone's wanting to get back in shape, or even going into the gym and signing up for those classes, and just, giving yourself realistic expectations for it. I think we psych ourselves out a lot. But really the big one that I see is forward head posture. And I'm a chiropractor. We talk about biomechanics. We talk about the forward head posture. Our ears should sit directly over your shoulder. It should be lined up that way. When our heads extend forward, it causes a huge amount of damage, not only in the neck and in the shoulders, but in the low back. 80% of the low back cases that come into my office, someone who has had low back pain, chronic low back pain, herniated discs, spinal stenosis, 80% of those cases are not just low back pain, but they are mainly neck issues because the neck has gone too far forward. The head has gone too far forward. It throws your center of gravity off. It puts undue stress and tension on your low back. And you have to address the neck in order to address the low back. I'll use a great example of this. Is I have 2 patients who were in my office at the same time. One was a 55-year-old Marine, and I'm trying to remember. He was a colonel. He was is airborne, Army, or Marine? It's Army, isn't it?
I think so.
Do you know this, David?
I think so. I'm not an expert, but I think so.
Yeah. Okay. So I thought so too. So he's airborne. He's a colonel. He was I think he did 3 tours in Afghanistan. Stressful job, had a lot going on. Came back and taught at West Point for 4 years. This is G.I. Joe I'm talking about. He was the man, and came in and he was dealing with some issues. Had a second guy, same age, 55 years old, dealing with some low back pain. He was in insurance and he sat behind his desk most of the time. I took x-rays. I took a health measurement of all of these guys. The guy who had the absolute worst spine was the guy who sat behind the desk for 20 years. Wow. It was awful. I told him, I told the insurance salesman, I sat down with him and I'm like, buddy, I am really good at helping people with health issues and correcting some of the nerve pressure that we see in the spine and getting back normal, healthy curves. This has gotten to the point where I can help you with pain relief. I can't correct this because the arthritis and the degeneration had gotten so bad in his spine that it was never going to change. He had fusion throughout his spine because he sat. And the guy who was the colonel who had done 3 tours in Afghanistan and jumped out of planes for 10 years and done all of these things, his spine had some issues, but it was nothing compared to the other guy because that guy moved and he wasn't trapped behind the desk doing computer work and living the American lifestyle. So it's technology. It plays a role, but it's how we consume it. Are you sitting at your desk? Can you stand up? Can you get your kids to be moving part of the time. And then they can have their technology time. We just limit time in our house where it's like, okay, you can have so much time on the iPad or so much screen time, and then get outside and jump on the trampoline, that kind of stuff.
Right. Yeah, that's so good. So what I hear you saying is incremental changes, incremental lifestyle adjustments are the best long-term investment because they stick with somebody rather than sweeping. I ingest 7 Twinkies a day. Now I'm a vegan and I live in the forest. So those type of changes don't stick usually.
And we've all done that. We've all done that where we either read a book or see a TV show, or we just get really sick of ourselves and you wake up and you're 20 pounds overweight and you're hungover and you don't feel good and you're like, I'm changing everything. And that lasts for, a week. So it's the small stuff. It's like, okay, you know what? I haven't been able to exercise the way that I want. I'm going to walk for 10 minutes. I'm going to do that. I'm going to do, maybe I'll go to a really easy kind of class at my local gym. Maybe I'll just get down and do 10 push-ups. And I commit to doing 10 push-ups every day for a week. I mean, that doesn't take a lot of time. That's easy. It's the small little things. Now, sometimes people get a big wake-up call and they need sweeping changes. I mean, they have a heart attack and survive a heart attack. You have got some big sweeping changes that you need to make in your life. But you also need the support system around you to help you maintain that. But the small little changes that we start building into our lives, those are the big ones. Because you know what? We're never going to check health off the list. It's never going to be like, hey, I reached a certain level, done with health, don't have to manage that anymore. Right. I mean, it's like saying, hey, I finally ate that last salad, don't have to eat salads anymore because, woo, I finally achieved it. It doesn't work that way. I mean, it's like, well, I finally brushed my teeth for the 1,000th time. I've hit, dental... The best dental ability ever, so I don't have to brush my teeth anymore. We're never going to check that off the box. So it's things that you can do every day that you also enjoy doing. That's a big deal too. You have to enjoy what you're doing. You have to love the exercise routine that you do. You have to love that stuff in order to make it consistent.
And one of the things I love that's happening with Dadstrong is guys are connecting in our Facebook group and on our pages and connecting with each other to go do physical activity, to meet up in certain areas and go ride bikes or go hiking or meet up and do something. And I firmly believe that the accountability aspect of a friend or somebody that you look up to, maybe somebody's a little bit further than you, at least how my personality works. I like to achieve something. So it's nice to have somebody ahead of me that I'm chasing. But for us in our house, it's my wife and I, we go and we do classes together. I don't have to think about it. I just go to the 9:30 class and sweat for an hour, burn 700 to 800 calories and get out of there. And we've been able to stick with that for 4 years because the two of us do it together. And how many more other guys are out there that are like, I want to change my health, but man, I wish I had somebody to do this with. And that's really the impetus behind Dadstrong, is that you can find other dads, maybe not in your area, but at least on the Facebook page, to say, hey, I'm making this decision. Will you help me and hold me accountable to this? Because I want to make a change. And there's so many other people in these groups that are like, I believe in you. You can do this. Let's do it together. And they're asking questions. And I think the community aspect of decreasing stress and the pressure of performance on a guy, I think it can really, really help to maintain something for the long run, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And I couldn't agree more. I work out in a community. I am a CrossFit guy. I've been a CrossFit guy for 10 years. The gym that I had joined was the 52nd affiliate ever in CrossFit. And I love it. I love the community aspect of it. I used to play high school sports, team sports, and I missed that. I didn't realize how much I missed it. And I missed it. I found that in my gym. And I love it because, again, you have that accountability and, people, you can quasi compete, but you can also just be like, you know what, they're suffering as much as I am and they're working towards a goal too. And that guy who wasn't able to, deadlift that amount of weight or finally get one strict pull up, he finally got it. I'm going to work hard and do that too. And it's just, it makes it so much more fun. It makes it so much more enjoyable. You push yourself more in a group. And I like that support, just like you were saying. You don't even think about it. You just get up, you just go. So I'm a big proponent of that kind of workout. And by the way, when it comes to stress, exercise is hands down one of the best de-stressors ever. And if you think about it, it goes back to that physiological, what we were programmed when we got flooded with stress hormones. How we burned them off was through exercise. Now, it was running away from a predator or fighting it off, but we burned them off.
Right.
And that's one of the best ways to get your body out of that fight or flight response and back into that parasympathetic. It's not just that runner high and endorphin. It is, you just cleaned your body out.
Yeah.
You just totally sweated out all of those stress hormones to help you get back to that place. That's why people who exercise sleep better. They feel better about themselves. They have better self-esteem. They're able to connect to their spouses and their families better because they're at that normal again. It's a body reset, and we all need so much of that. We all need it. So,
right.
Yeah. Such a good thing.
Yeah. And so if I'm going to sum up everything that we've just talked about, we have stressors, and we would do very well to take inventory of have a really honest inventory of what are our stressors. And they might be relational, and you might have to have some hard conversations that I promise will be freeing for you. So we have stressors. Exercise is an amazing thing that is super important for us to counteract a sedentary lifestyle, which all of our American brothers and sisters are really pushed into a sedentary lifestyle in a lot of ways, unless we choose not to. That's kind of the default here. So exercise counteracts that, and we invest into our health. We're not just throwing money down the drain when we're investing in our health. It's a hugely important thing. And then the third aspect is community. Having community is a healthy thing, whether it's in your home or it's with other brothers and sisters and other people that you can connect with to keep these incremental changes sticking so that your life stays consistent and you're in this thing for the long run. You're thinking about, playing with your grandkids or great grandkids. If you're a dad with, 3 and 5 year old or 7, 8 year old, whatever, young kids right now, you're thinking for the long run. So how do you stick with that for the long haul? And I love what you just said, Dr. Hall, that it's incremental. And so incremental changes, having a community around you and really decreasing the stressors in your life. I mean, those are amazingly practical items that we can implement. Any of us can implement right away. Did I miss anything?
No, not really. The only parting shot that I would give you here is identify where your biggest stresses are coming from: physical, chemical, and emotional stress. Where's your biggest physical stress? Is it sitting at the desk? Is it that old car accident that you had 5 years ago? Is it an old sports injury? Where's the biggest physical stress that's coming in your life? Where's the biggest chemical stress? Is it the 6-pack of beer that you're drinking in the evenings? Or is it, the fast food that you're consuming too much of? Is it the pharmaceuticals? Where's the biggest chemical stress? Where's the biggest emotional stress? And what can you do, if not to change those, but to support your life around it? It's not about getting rid of all stresses. It's finding quality, better stresses, or creating our lives around those stresses so we can help support it. I mean, again, you're not going to get rid of that over-controlling boss, but you need to let the rest of your family know and the rest of the people, hey, I need support in this stress. What can I be doing so this stress does not affect my health and my relationships over a long period of time? So that would be it.
Yeah. And one last little tweak on that, and that's something that I've noticed as far as chemical stresses go. Sometimes an indicator of that, or a little flag that you can look through your life and see is it something that I am longing for? And is it a consumable that I can't have get through my day without, or I'm looking forward to, and I have to have it? And those types of things, not many people are addicted to broccoli. So, if you're like, for me recently, I took inventory. I'm like, man, I usually am really looking forward to that cocktail at the end of the day, or that beer at the end of the day.
Yep.
And it wasn't killing my body necessarily, and I wasn't completely addicted to it, but I saw it as an indicator of, you know what, it's probably not healthy that I am mentally looking to this to cut the edge off of my day. So just personally, this is not for everybody, but personally, I'm going to cut it out for 30 days and just maybe longer. I don't know. But just to say, you know what, I don't want to be in a position, whether it's sugar, whether it's alcohol, whether it's carbs, whatever it is, it might be fine on its own. But when your body starts to say, I have to have this, or man, I'm going to release so much dopamine once I get this, or whatever it gets released when that happens, it may or may not be too healthy for you. So I don't know. I just wanted to put that in there because I had to make that decision recently, and it wasn't very easy to do, and it's not easy on a daily basis. So looking at that, I'm like, maybe that is a good decision.
And I love that you say that. And really what it is people talk about emotional eating all the time, or emotional whatever. And it's like, there's nothing wrong with emotional eating. It's really not. I mean, some of the best ways that we connect with friends and family and engaging, especially as we come up to the holidays, is sitting down and having a great meal together. It's eye contact, it's laughter. That's emotional eating. There's nothing wrong with that. To say that we shouldn't have emotions around eating is like saying we should only have sex for procreation. Right. I mean, it's like, oh, emotional sex. No. It's like, it goes back to, it's like, that's great to have that, but is eating your coping mechanism? Right. And is it the only coping mechanism? Is the cocktail at the end of the day, or the glass of wine, or the couple glasses of wine, is that a coping mechanism? Okay, that's fine. But is that your only coping mechanism? And how much are you leaning on that coping mechanism? Because frankly, exercise in a lot of ways can be a great coping mechanism, but you have to watch out for using exercise too much as a coping mechanism. What are you trying to get away from? What are you needing that extra workout where you're pushing yourself too much? Or what are you needing those extra glasses of wine? What are you trying to get away from? Right. And again, how are you using that coping mechanism in your life? And is it the only one? Because frankly, sometimes it's okay to come home and have a drink if you've had a long day. But if you're doing that every day, and if it's the only way for you to release stress, then you're in trouble. Right. So that's my 2 cents on that.
That's awesome. No, that's wonderful. I've really enjoyed this conversation with you. You have such a depth of wisdom. Obviously, you have studied this and practiced it, and you've had a lot of case studies in front of you of what to do and not to do, and the results of long-term poor habits. So we are definitely going to have to do this again. And I think this was such a wonderful conversation on stress, and then the other auxiliary items that we discussed. But again, thank you so much for your time. If people want to know more about what you're doing, because I know you do some speaking, you do some events, you have some other services, where can they go to find out about that?
My practice in Overland Park is Wellspine KC, WELL Spine, SPINE KC, as in Kansas City, wellspinekc.com. You can find me there. You can also find me on Facebook, Andrew Hall. I'm right there on Facebook as well. I'm not much of a Twitter guy, so I never really caught on to that. So,
me neither.
But Wellspinekc and Facebook, that's where you can find me if you want to ever connect or have questions or anything like that. I mean, this is my passion. This is what I love doing. This is what I've dedicated my life to do. So it's great to do it. So, and I love it.
Well, we can tell you have so much passion about it and so much life when you're speaking about it. So I love that. So again, wellspinekc.com, or just find him on Facebook, Andrew Hall. He's also in the Dadstrong group. So if you want an amazing resource, go join the Be Dadstrong group on Facebook if you're not there already.
Thanks for listening to this podcast. I am so grateful you got to hear what we just went through. And if you love what you just heard, come join us over at BeDadstrong.com and grab yourself some swag, grab a hat, a shirt, sport the brand that is helping dads be strong for their families, changing the world one household at a time. Thanks again for listening, and hope to see you over at BeDadstrong.com.